Hi friends, welcome back. In this video, we will see how to work with XDCR. As you see, this is cluster 1, which is having 7 nodes. This is one more cluster, cluster 2, which is having only 3 nodes. You can consider this as upgrade scenario. Cluster 1 is the cluster I want to upgrade. So for that, I'll be creating one more cluster with desired number of nodes and with latest Couchbase version installed on it. I have no buckets in the new cluster. I'll be creating empty buckets. One important point to check is conflict resolution type, because replication will only work between the buckets which are having same conflict resolution type. I'm creating all the buckets. The buckets got created with same conflict resolution type as in cluster 1. Let me create few documents to test filtering condition when we are creating replication. We already have 5 documents. I have created 2 more documents. First, let me create an unidirectional replication from cluster 1 to cluster 2. As I said, a replication is a two-step process. First, we need to add the remote cluster name, cluster 2, give any name. I'm giving my cluster 2. IP address, you can give any IP address of the cluster nodes. If you don't provide any port here, it will use 8091. If you want, you can also mention 18091, which is encrypted port. I am giving admin credentials because I am creating this replication for testing. In the real time, you may need to create a dedicated user for XDCR and then use that user here. So first, let me go with the default ones and then create a connection without selecting the secure connection. You can see one cluster is added under remote clusters. Now I will create a replication. Click on add replication. Select the bucket you want to replicate. Select the remote cluster. Remote bucket. We have same bucket in source and target, so I'm giving the same name. It may be a different bucket also. I'm leaving all the settings as defaults and click save. You can see in few seconds rest bucket items will be updated. You can see 5 items now. And you can also see the status replicating. You can ignore this compression related message as we have already got the documents. We are good here. Once replication is created, we can cross check the items in the source bucket as well as in the target bucket. Both should match. We can also see the statistics. You can view the stats for every minute, hour, day, week, month. Since my bucket is having very few documents, you're not seeing much spikes in the graphs. This is called unidirectional replication because we don't have replication configured from cluster 2 to cluster 1. We only have it from cluster 1 to 2. Now let me delete this replication and delete the remote cluster also. My data should be still there. I have 7 documents still here. Now let me add remote cluster one more time. Cluster name, any node IP of the cluster 2 IPs. Now I want to go with enable secure connection and I have selected half SSL. For this, we need to copy paste the root certificate of remote cluster. Cluster 2, go to security, click on root certificate, copy the content. When you are copying, make sure you are copying from begin certificate till end certificate. Paste it here, click on save. You can see the remote cluster is added with half SSL. Let me add replication. This time I'm going with REST TMP bucket, remote cluster name, remote bucket name. My source and target bucket names are same, so I'm giving same name. Replication filters, we can give it and we are creating the replication one more time, clicking save. Now we should get items for REST TMP bucket as well. You can see the statistics. Now let me drop the replication and also the remote cluster. Let me add them one more time. Again, I'm enabling secure connection. This time I'm going ahead with full SSL. For this also, we have to copy paste the root certificate of remote cluster. Here, we can go with root certificate plus credentials, or if we are not providing credentials, we can go with root certificate plus client certificate and key. So combination is required here, either root certificate plus client certificate and key, or root certificate plus credentials. So I'm going ahead with root certificate and credentials. Now my remote cluster is added with full SSL. Add replication. Before adding this replication, let me flush the rest bucket. There is a warning, bucket data will be lost. Now I have 0 items in rest bucket. Now for this replication, I don't want all the 7 items. I need only 2 items which are starting with REPL. So I have to mention a filter condition when I am creating replication. Click on add replication, my source bucket, my remote cluster, and my target bucket, which is also rest, and replication filters. Here is my filter. I want to test this filter before creating the replication. So I'm giving REPL1. So there is a match, which means my filter condition is working as expected. Click on save. So now I should get only 2 items here, which are starting with REPL. You can see 2 documents. Let's cross check. Click on documents. I can see REPL1 and REPL2. So out of 7 documents, only 2 got replicated. Now let me create one more replication for travel sample bucket. Add replication, travel sample. Advanced replication settings, you no need to touch this until unless something is recommended by Couchbase support team, because they have already optimized these settings for the better performance. I don't want to replicate delete operations from cluster 1 to cluster 2. So let me check this. And if you want to remove TTL from replicated items, you can check this box. You can check this checkbox if you do not replicate document expirations. So click on save. I should get 2 items here in few seconds. Okay, I can see 2 items for travel sample bucket. You can see that for travel sample replication, we have selected do not replicate deletes. So let's test that. I will create a test document. One document got created. You can see the document replicated to cluster 2. Now if I delete this test document in cluster 1, it should not reflect here as per the XDCR configuration. So let me delete it. It is deleted. Let me refresh in cluster 2. We can still see the document test. So our XDCR configuration is working as expected. Now let me create a replication from cluster 2 to cluster 1. Once we create a replication from cluster 2 to cluster 1, this setup is called bidirectional replication, because we already have a replication configured from cluster 1 to cluster 2. Now we are configuring replication from cluster 2 to cluster 1. If you see, I have configured replication only for 2 buckets. So if I create replication for these 2 buckets in cluster 2, only rest and travel sample buckets are configured bidirectional replication, because we haven't created for other buckets. Let me create replication from cluster 2 to cluster 1. Add remote cluster, my cluster 1. I'm going with full SSL. Click save. Add replication, rest and travel sample buckets. I created replication similar to rest bucket in cluster 1. You can see the status replicating. Let me create one more replication for travel sample bucket. Now rest and travel sample buckets are configured with bidirectional replication. So let's see how the documents are getting updated. This is the content of REPL1 document in cluster 2. Let me modify something in this document from cluster 1 and see it is replicating in cluster 2. So I have added one extra line. Let's see it is replicated in cluster 2 or not. Let me refresh. You can see the new column reflected in cluster 2. Same way, let me create one document in cluster 2 and see whether it is replicating to cluster 1. I just created REPL3 document in cluster 2. Let's check. You can see REPL3 created in cluster 1. So bidirectional replication is working as expected.